today's order paper. Orders of the day.
Private members' business, consideration of motion M64, Italian Heritage Month.
Ms. Schultz, seconded by Mr. Sorbera, moves that in the opinion of the House, that
in the opinion of the House, the government should recognize the contributions that Italian Canadians have made to Canadian society, the richness of the Italian language and culture, and the importance of educating and reflecting upon Italian heritage for future generations by declaring June every year Italian Heritage Month. Debate.
Débat. The Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Thank you. Signor Presidente, oggi è un grande giornata. Today is a great day. Today I have the pleasure of rising in the House to introduce my private member's motion, M64, a motion to designate June as a National Italian Heritage Month. I always forget to take the piece out of my ear. Sorry about that. I'm delighted to have the support of my Liberal Italian caucus colleagues who have worked with me on this and are seconding the motion. I want to thank those that are in the House with me today to show their support and to share their stories today. I also want to thank those in the community that brought this initiative to our attention, one of them being in the House today, my former colleague Marilyn Iafredi from Vaughan Council. And I'd like to inform the House that I also have the support. I just have a letter that just came in today from the National Congress of Italian Canadians and the National Federation of Canadian Italian Business and Professional Associations, the CIBPA, and the Order Sons of Italy of Canada, the OSIC, wholeheartedly expressed their support for my motion. The Canadian Ethnocultural Council, the CEC, the only not-for-profit, non-partisan national coalition of ethnocultural organizations, of which the NCIC is a proud member, whose objectives, inter alia, are to engage ethnocultural communities to foster harmony and acceptance of our diversity and multiculturalism, which is one of the cornerstones of our great country. They also ardently support my motion. This motion is meant to designate the month of June as National Italian Heritage Month in recognition of the contributions that Italian Canadians have made to Canadian society. It provides a designated month to celebrate the richness of the Italian language and culture and the importance of educating and reflecting upon Italian heritage for future generations. You may ask, why June? Why would it be the selected month for the motion? Well, Italy celebrates its National Day on June the 2nd, and the province of Ontario in 2010 passed Bill 103, an act to proclaim June as Italian Heritage Month. So it is appropriate that June be the designated month. Mr. Speaker, some may ask, why am I, a non-Italian, bringing this motion forward? I'm very proud to represent the second largest percentage of Italian Canadians in any riding in Canada, and I was lucky to draw an early placement in my private member's bill order, which provided me the opportunity to recognize the important contributions of Italian Canadians through this motion, and hopefully in time for June 2017, which is Canada's 150th anniversary. The Italian community is very active in my riding and has shown me significant support over many years, and I know how important this motion is to them. I was proud to serve them as a regional councillor and now as an MP. However, this is not just a motion for Italian Canadians in my riding, but for Italian Canadians from coast to coast to coast. This is also a motion for all Canadians as we celebrate our multiculturalism. Here in Canada, we seem to have gotten it right, and this is in no small measure because of the work of our immigrant communities, sharing their cultures and traditions, working to support not only their own communities, but all Canadians as we work toward building a better country. Italian Canadians have contributed greatly over the past century to growing this country. When they came to Canada, they faced many hardships. However, they brought with them a rich cultural heritage, a dedication to family, and a strong work ethic that has helped many to succeed. They've become community leaders, successful business entrepreneurs, and builders of our country. It is clear, witnessing the growth in the city of Vaughan and much of York Region, you can see the hand of the Italian community at work. Each different region in Italy is known for their trades and their skills that they brought to this country, and they have applied those widely across the country. This country offered them opportunity, but it was their skills and ambition and work ethic that made them very successful. Italians are also known for their wine, prosciutto, parmigiano, marinara sauce, and who can forget the pizza, and all those other wonderful food creations that I am so happy to enjoy in my community. Of course, there's that iconic Italian style with Armani and Gucci, and many other designers of clothes, cars, furniture, actually anything you think of, they've tried their hand at and given it that unique twist of Italian style. We can think of Danny Iannuzzi, the great journalist and founder of Corriere Canadese, Johnny Lombardi, an incredible pioneer in broadcasting, and Guy Lombardo in the music world. We have Frank Arcobucci, a Supreme Court Justice, and Laura Sabia, a leading activist in the women's movement. Both were Order of Canada recipients. I'm sure you can bring to mind many others without having to think too hard, as there have been successful and influential Italian Canadians in all aspects of Canadian life. Mr. Speaker, there have also been notable politicians, and I think it's worth mentioning a few from the federal level. In the 1950s, Mayor Hubert Badani of Fort William was elected the first Italian federal member of Parliament for the Liberal Party, and in 1981, Charles Caccia, initially elected as a Toronto MP for Davenport, in 1968, was appointed the first federal cabinet minister by none other than Prime Minister Trudeau. They laid the foundation for many that came after, including my friend, the Mayor of Vaughan, Maurizio Bevilacqua, former Member of Parliament from 1988 to 2010, and my Italian-Canadian colleagues currently serving in this House. I want to share a bit of Italian-Canadian history, as I'm not sure there are many familiar with how far back Italian contributions to this country go. Italian Canadians are among the earliest Europeans to have come and settled in the country. Over 500 years ago, Giovanni Caboto, John Cabot, an Italian navigator from Venice, explored and claimed the coast of Newfoundland for England. And in 1524, another Italian, Giovanni Verrazzano, explored part of Atlantic Canada for France. In the 1600s, Italians served in the military of New France, and several hundred Italian soldiers served in the British Army during the War of 1812, after which they settled in the eastern townships of Quebec and southern Ontario. Italian craftsmen, artists, musicians, and teachers came to this country throughout the 19th century, and by 1881, almost 2,000 people of Italian origin lived in Canada, mostly in Toronto and Montreal. In the late 19th century, millions of Italians emigrated, and many came to Canada. They worked on our railways, in mines, in our industries. And by the 1901, there were almost 11,000 people of Italian origin living in Canada. Not all were successful, and some were misled and ended up unemployed and destitute in major cities, or working in labor and lumber camps in northern Ontario. Many were often exploited in the early days. However, as more Italians settled and became successful, they sponsored more relatives and fellow villagers and created businesses and supported each other as they helped to grow our country. Throughout the 1900s, those who settled in the cities worked as construction and factory workers, building tradesmen, food and fruit merchants, or artisans, barbers, cobblers. Out of modest beginnings, some became highly successful. For example, Ornato Catelli of Montreal in the food processing industry. In the Niagara Peninsula and the Okanagan Valley, Italians prospered with orchards, vineyards, vegetable farms. Many Italian farmers grew crops on the outskirts of cities for local consumption. Even now, they're still working the land and selling their products at roadside stands in my riding. Many families in my community tend backyard plots that they use to feed their families and friends fresh food all summer and fall. Mr. Speaker, by 1930, over 29,000 Italians had entered Canada. This movement of Italians to Canada virtually stopped with the Great Depression. It was a difficult time that got worse after 1935, when Italian Canadians were designated enemy aliens and were the victims of widespread prejudice and discrimination because Italy allied with Germany during the Second World War. Men lost their jobs, shops were vandalized, civil liberties were suspended, and hundreds were interned at Camp Petawawa in Northern Ontario. As a result, many Italians anglicized their names and denied their Italian background. It was a difficult time in Canada for Italians. After the Second World War, Canada, with its booming economy, began to be receptive to Italian immigrants again. In 1958, Italy surpassed Britain as a source of Canadian immigrants, as a source for Canadian immigrants. In cities where Italians have settled, they tended to create ethnic neighborhoods, little Italies, with their distinctive shops, restaurants, churches, and clubs. These areas have been a magnet for all Canadians looking to get a taste of Italy. Through the years, these areas have reduced in size as more Italian Canadians moved out to the suburbs. However, they still like to live in areas that supported their Italian culture. So they brought them with them. They brought their shops, their restaurants, showcasing the very best of their culture. In 2006, 60% of Italian Canadians lived in Ontario, 21% in Quebec, 10% in British Columbia, and about 95% lived in towns and cities. The highest number of Italian Canadians live in Toronto, and approximately half that number now live in Montreal. We have significant numbers of Italian Canadians living in cities across the country, with a total of almost now 1.5 million listing Italian as their ethnic origin or part of their ethnic origin. For Italians, family and religion are interrelated pillars of their cultural identity. Despite cross-cultural unions, the family and a close connection to the Italian culture are a source of strength and pride. Reflecting the importance of the family unit and the home as its center, Italian Canadians have the highest rate of home ownership in Canada. Another source of pride is their commitment to Italian Canadian community groups and the wide spectrum of activities that are undertaken to express their ethno-cultural identity. I have also personally found them to be exceptionally generous when it comes to supporting those in need and to improving programs and facilities needed to build stronger communities for all. For example, hospitals, seniors facilities, and many social support programs. The Italian Canadian press and media have also been strong promoters of social cohesion and have brought their Italian constituency and the wider society together. The first Italian newspaper was published in Montreal in the late 19th century, and by 1950, dozens of Italian newspapers and magazines proliferated across Canada. Today we have the Corriere Canadese and several other community papers that promote Italian culture and news. We also have Omni TV, a multilingual TV station in Ontario that transmits in Italian and other languages daily. And we have Teletino Network, that's a national cable system for Italian and Spanish programming. Currently, Italian and Chinese are the most widespread non-official languages in Canadian television and radio broadcasting. I'm incredibly proud of the contributions of Italian Canadians in helping to build this great country, and I'm honored to have an opportunity to bring forward a motion to designate that month of June as National Italian Heritage Month. I'm delighted to have the full support of the Liberal Italian Caucus members and to have many of them here with me today. We're scattered around as we start the debate in this House. I'll be listening carefully to any concerns raised during the debate and hope that we can work together to get unanimous support from this House for this important motion. Merci, thank you, grazie.
Questions and comments? Queste commenta, the Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Grazie, Signor Presidente, and much thanks to my colleague across the way for bringing this forward. We have a vibrant and hardworking, strong Italian community within the riding of Sarnia-Lambton, and so I'm very supportive of celebrating their history, both within Canada and their many great aspects of their culture, including the food. So my question for the member is, what are the special ways she would like to see us recognize them when Italian Heritage Day becomes a reality?
Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question because we have been turning our mind to what would be appropriate. And I think I'll have to hold off a little bit on exactly what that will be because we are working closely with some of those organizations that I mentioned earlier in my speech to figuring out what would they like to do to represent, this special month. And so I won't jump the gun and presuppose, what might be appropriate, but I'm looking forward to the many suggestions that I believe will be coming forward. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Regina Leuven.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member across the way asked for unanimous support. The NDP is certainly proud to support Italian Heritage Month, and it sounds like the Conservatives are as well. I'm very proud of the fact that the last annual meeting of the Regina Leuven NDP was held at the Italian Club, a very popular and historic institution in Regina. Saskatchewan's provincial motto is "From many people's strength." So I would like to ask the member across the way if she could elaborate on how Italian immigration has strengthened our country.
Member for King Vaughan.
Well, thank you very much to the member for the question. I think if in my speech I went through quite deeply the many things that the Italian Canadians have been doing to strengthen the country. We can go to the simple things of the building side of things, but we need to realize that the cultural things have been really important too. Pizza is a national food item. In Canada, I think, I don't know anybody that hasn't had a slice of pizza, and, we can thank the Italians for that. So there's a lot of cultural things in our food, in our style, in the way we have our homes, and some of the new modern ways that we live in our homes that have come directly from Italian Canadians bringing their rich heritage to this country. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you. Signor Presidente, sono orgoglioso di prendere la parola oggi in qualità di italo-canadese, nella mia veste di Presidente del Gruppo Interparlamentare Canada-Italia, nonché di membro del Parlamento che rappresenta i collegi con la più alta concentrazione di canadesi di origini italiane. Sono bene consapevole del ruolo prezioso che la nostra comunità ha svolto nella costruzione del Canada, dell'impatto che continuiamo ad avere sulla società canadese attraverso il nostro ingegno, il nostro duro lavoro e l'influenza della nostra cultura. Vorrei ringraziare la mia collega per il suo intervento e chiedere alla deputata di King Vaughan di parlarci del sostegno che ha ricevuto insieme a membri liberali di origine italiana e perché è così importante che il contributo degli italo-canadesi venga ufficialmente riconosciuto. Thank you.
Honourable member for King Vaughan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleague for that excellent question in Italian. And I hope one day I'll be able to do a reply in Italian. But at the moment, I think for the benefit of the rest of the people in the House, the general thrust of the question was to ask me, in terms of the support that I got from my colleagues and how did I work with my colleagues to get to this point. And I just wanted to first thank him for his leadership on the Italian-Canadian Friendship Group and also for the Italian Liberal Caucus. He's very, very active and stays quite closely connected with the Italian community, with all of those working hard to promote Italian ideals and culture in the country. So I'm just honored to have had the privilege of working with the Liberal Italian Caucus as I moved forward on this. I came before I even actually put it on the floor, put it in journals, to make sure that I would have their support, and they've worked very closely with me to make sure that I've done it the right way. So again, thank you for his leadership, and I appreciate their support and your support. Take care.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And often in this place, we tend to debate most often on subjects we tend to disagree. However, one subject where I believe that we do have agreement is recognizing the unique contribution of Italian Canadians. When I mentioned to a constituent recently that I would be speaking in support of this, I received an enthusiastic response that included references to pizza, pasta, art, sculpture, and the things associated with being uniquely Italian. But the real purpose of my stating my support today is ultimately to recognize the people, those Italian Canadians who have truly enriched this great country. And let me explain what I mean by that, Mr. Speaker. There was a time where a point of view on immigration was that new Canadians should abandon the culture that they originated from to adopt the Canadian way. But what did that mean exactly? In the case of many Italian Canadians, and to be clear, Mr. Speaker, I'm not of Italian ancestry, Italian culture was not only embraced, it was shared. Indeed, the many communities across our great country, including Ottawa, there is a Little Italy. And I'm certain I'm not alone in expressing my fondness for visiting areas such as these. It is because of regions such as these that our communities have been enhanced. More so, our knowledge has been expanded. Today, we often call this multiculturalism. However, to many Italian Canadians I have met, it is simply the friendly way to treat friends and neighbors through sharing and enjoying all that life has to offer. In Kelowna, as an example, the Kelowna Canadian Italian Club is celebrating 50 years in the community, and that is a very exciting milestone. And the club wants to share this achievement with the entire community. Now, some of you might ask, what does an Italian Canadian club do? Well, yes, they promote Italian language and culture through food, music, and wine. And really, where could you go wrong with that, Mr. Speaker? But most importantly, they also give back to the community and participate in many community fundraisers. As example, recently the Kelowna Italian Club raised over $13,000 to help earthquake victims. A very impressive feat, considering the club just has around 130 member families. Now, I'm not certain how many Italian Canadian clubs we have in Canada, nor do I know how many communities have their own Little Italy as an integral part of their community. But what I do know is that all of us, Italian Canadian or not, all have an understanding of the Italian culture, language, and a unique way of enjoying life, often through celebration. But not just celebration, Mr. Speaker. Hard work and innovation. As a former city councillor, when we upgraded a wastewater treatment plant, Mr. Speaker, many of the systems that actually went into it, the advanced technology, was designed in Italy. And much of the work, when it was brought over, was recognized as world-leading. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, from speaking to many of the people that work for the municipality, they appreciated those innovations. And I think Italians across the world, particularly those Italian Canadians that share that heritage, are very proud of the quality. Now, this extends more than just to a small area of public infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. I know from Brutus Body's trucks in Penticton, Normar Industries is the holding company, but they use Italian cranes, and which is one of the reasons why their products are in such demand, because when you deal with highly reputable companies that are innovative and that have such ties to Canada, it's much easier to sell that product. Now, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the innovation, I just want to again loop back to the growing ties between Canada and Italy. Now, my grandfather, who recently passed away, God bless him, he actually served in North Africa and eventually in Italy. And he always told me with utmost respect that he had for the Italian people and the difficulties many of them had during World War II. And his love for the country only grew as the years went on, Mr. Speaker. But I think also the love and the ties that Italian Canadians have brought to this country have not only enriched our culture and our understanding, but also, as I said, innovation, but also growing our ties as far as trade. Now, we have another thing I think that we can agree on, is my understanding is we will be discussing the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement between Canada and the European Union next week, Mr. Speaker. And as I spoke to you about many of those innovative water systems, as I've spoke about the cranes that Normar uses for their vehicles, all those things will suddenly have tariff-free access. And people will have greater access to Italians and Italy will have greater access to Canadians with services and skills and shared understanding that will make both of our countries better, Mr. Speaker. Now, while I'm still on my feet and having the opportunity, I'd just like to thank the sponsoring member for the contribution of this time, and again, the contribution of Italian Canadians, and for my ability to stand up, Mr. Speaker, and just share a little bit of the enrichment that I've had and that many people in central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola have had in their opportunities with the Italian Canadian community. And Mr. Speaker, again, thank you to the member, and thank you to all the members who have taken the good time today to listen to the debate and to feel that this is a positive forum for those contributions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I am proud to stand up in the House to speak in favour of Motion 64 for the creation of Italian Heritage Month. Acknowledging the many contributions of Italian Canadians is key to recognizing the beautiful mosaic that is our country. Setting aside time to reflect on why our diversity has made our country great is an important reminder that unless you are Indigenous, then your family line is an immigrant one. It is an important reminder in this time that Canada needs newcomers to continue to build our country as our population grows and ages. Multiculturalism is a fundamental Canadian value, and the NDP has a proud history of supporting multiculturalism and honoring our country's diversity. Across Canada, there are many stories of the knowledge and expertise that Italian immigrants have contributed to Canadian society, a history comprised of Italian immigrants who established themselves in many communities across Canada. In my riding of North Island Powell River, an Italian immigrant by the name of Joseph Rodello built a hotel and store near Comox's Wharf in the 1870s. Later on, he had a street named after him that now runs by St. Joseph's Hospital. In fact, Mr. Speaker, many Italian immigrants came to the Comox Valley in the 20th century to work principally in the coal mines. Often fleeing poverty from different parts of the world, they came to our region looking for a better opportunity for their families. Their mark on the communities is still visible today. In Campbell River, for the past over 20 years, the Campbell River Italian Cultural Society has hosted an annual event at Miracle Beach Provincial Park, where hundreds gather to enjoy the outdoors, celebrate their culture, and savor home cooking. The sale of homemade sausages and spaghetti has raised more than $21,000 to support quality care for residents in Campbell River and the North Island. In Powell River, Mr. Speaker, when the mill was just opening, many Italians came to settle in the community for work. Many settled particularly in the Wildwood area, where the Italian Cultural Center is located still today. During the most vibrant years for the Italian community in Powell River, a great deal of food was produced in gardens and small farms, fruits and vegetables and some livestock. Food security is far less of an issue, with considerable local production and excellent growing conditions, a long season, and excellent soil in that part of the community. When we think of long-term impacts, Mr. Speaker, many of those same orchards remain in Powell River, though they are not often attended to and no longer fully harvested. But the hard work is still benefiting people today, as we are seeing an increase of people who are taking the fruit and providing it to various organizations that feed Powell River's growing number of homeless and hungry. In my past work as the Executive Director of the Immigrant Welcome Center in North Island, I remember hearing the story of one Italian immigrant whose family had settled in the west coast of Canada. Wanting to have their relative join them, this man took a boat to Halifax. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is many people, when they were new to the country, didn't quite understand the size of the country. It was an interesting story that he shared with me about how fortunate he was that he brought his accordion with him, because once he arrived, of course, in Halifax, he realized he had to travel to the other side of a very vast country. And so he used the accordion to make money to cross the country and be reunited with his family. It's stories like this, Mr. Speaker, that have grown the wonderful diversity of our country, and we see the richness that Italians have brought and how strong they have created that culture in Canada of community, family, and feeding one another. Mr. Speaker, across Canada, there are 1.4 million Canadians of Italian descent. And while this community is alive and thriving today, we must acknowledge that its history in Canada has not always been positive. Canada's allegiance in the Second World War led to many Italian Canadians being singled out as enemy aliens. What we now know is that the Italian community has thrived in Canada, even though that dark time happened, while promoting and developing our multiculturalism fabric. The numerous organizations that we contacted to discuss this motion were excited and pleased to lend their support. Of course, my province of BC declared the month of June as Italian Heritage Month several years ago. I'm very proud to support this motion, one that allows us the time to appreciate the people who came here to join this country. Their contributions have been significant, be it in the construction of urban infrastructures, the knowledge of arts and trades, or the manufacturing and textile industries, and many, many more. These men and women worked hard to build the country that we see today. This motion will allow all Canadians to acknowledge and celebrate the rich cultural traditions we have gained from the Italian community, and I look forward to lending my support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to seek consensus to split time with my honourable colleague from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Does the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage have the unanimous consent of the House to split his time with the aforementioned member? Yes? Agreed? Agreed? Okay. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliament said that'll be, just for clarification, it'll be 5 minutes each. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my honourable colleagues across the way. It is an honour today to be able to speak to the House in support of motion M64, introduced by my colleague, the member from King Vaughan.
Canada is a proud multicultural society that embraces the diversity of its communities of yesteryear and today that continue to support the origins, identities, and beliefs of each community.
Contributions to Canada's history and heritage and continue to enrich our growing, diverse, and pluralistic society, including in my home riding of Edmonton Centre. The enduring vitality and richness of the Italian language, culture, and people in Canada are a powerful testament to what can be achieved through multiculturalism, a diverse, inclusive, and strong society built upon the foundation of mutual respect. Italian Heritage Month will provide an opportunity to celebrate this achievement.
Mr. Speaker, the throne speech that opened the current parliamentary session underscored the diversity which strengthens Canada. The current Prime Minister described Canada's diversity as one of our greatest strengths and a source of pride for all. Parliament's support for Italian Heritage Month would be in keeping with this reassertion of our commitment to multiculturalism.
The government is pleased to support this motion. I am confident that the members of this House will vote in favour of this motion, and the Italian community will receive the recognition they have sought and that they deserve. Festeggiamo tutti il mese del patrimonio culturale italiano.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Signor Presidente, è con grande orgoglio che io, figlio di immigranti italiani, mi levo in piedi di fronte a voi per parlarvi di questa mozione che propone di proclamare il mese di giugno quale mese del patrimonio culturale italiano. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. It is with great pride that I rise today as a son of Italian immigrants to speak on this motion, which would declare June as Italian Heritage Month. La mozione riconosce il contributo che gli italo-canadesi hanno dato alla società canadese, la ricchezza della cultura e della storia italiana in Canada e l'importanza di ricordare e promuovere il patrimonio culturale italiano per le future generazioni. The motion recognizes the contributions that Italian Canadians have made to Canadian society, the richness of the Italian culture, and history in Canada and the importance of educating and reflecting upon Italian heritage for future generations. Per molti immigranti italiani la storia italo-canadese è una storia di sacrifici, di duro lavoro, di relazione e il successo infine di integrazione in questo bellissimo paese. C'è un proverbio tra gli italo-canadesi che dice che l'Italia è il paese dove sono nato, ma il Canada è la mia casa. For many Italian immigrants, the Italian-Canadian story is one of sacrifice and hard work, achievement and success, and ultimately of integration into this beautiful country. For Italian Canadians, there is a saying that Italy is my native country, but Canada is my home. This year will mark 57 years that my family is in Canada. My grandparents, along with their 7 children, left southern Italy and the province of Calabria with nothing but what they could carry. They sailed from Naples on board the vessel of Vulcania, arriving at Pier 21 in Halifax. Much like many Italian immigrants, they left to find a better future and settled on the west coast of Canada, where they worked in construction industry, pulp mills, fish canneries. I think humbly of my parents, my aunts and uncles who came to Canada with little knowledge of English, with little or no formal education, but what they did have was a sense of pride, a work ethic, an unwavering commitment to provide a better future for their children. I think of my father, who, like many Italian immigrants, became a tradesman, a carpenter, a roofer, a sheet metal worker. He taught me the values of integrity, a strong drive to succeed, and a commitment to family. My mother worked tirelessly in a fish cannery. In the morning, everything would be ready for myself and my 2 brothers. And after a long day at work, she would come home, cook, and make certain the house was spotless. My parents not only taught me the value of hard work, but the value of a dollar saved. This is the kind of people they were. I think of the contributions of the trailblazers who opened the door for many of us. Frank Iacobucci, the retired Supreme Court Justice. Charles Caccia, the great environmentalist, social activist, and former MP for Davenport from 1968 to 2004. Pietro Rizzuto and Peter Boza, both senators appointed by Pierre Trudeau. Johnny Lombardi and Gaetano Galliano, whose legacies in the media business continue today. I think of the success of the Canadian-Italian business community that stretches across this country. Names such as the Braddis, the Bozas, the De Gasperis, the Cerberas, the Cordaluccis, the Dezens, the Aquilinis, the Muzos, the Baldasseros, the Saputos, and many more. I think of the richness and vitalities in the communities Italian Canadians settled in, Commercial Drive in Vancouver, College Street in St. Clair in Toronto, and St. Leonard in Montreal. Mr. Speaker, I am privileged to represent the riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, which has the largest concentration of Italian Canadians in Canada. My greatest enjoyment as MP is visiting the seniors groups, where many recount their stories of arrival in Canada, the hardship they faced, including discrimination and bigotry, and how much they sacrificed for their children. They are all proud of being Canadian and thank the opportunity for a better future this country gave them. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'd like to read a quote from the commemorative plaque on the Italian Fallen Workers Memorial of Ontario. During the great diaspora of Italian immigration between 1870 and 1970, thousands of Italians left their homeland in search of a better life for their families. Many of them found their way to Ontario, where they toiled beyond belief in all of the harshest industries of the last century, digging the sewer systems of many Ontario cities, creating the structures for the new hydroelectricity plants, building the massive bridges and tunnels of our transportation infrastructure, mining for ore in Ontario's north, and erecting residential and commercial buildings in the blossoming construction industry, which ultimately built up this beautiful province. Per questo sono onorato di essere qui oggi, di far parte di questo incredibile gruppo di persone che chiama il Canada la propria casa. Siamo davvero orgogliosi di essere canadesi perché questo paese così bello, variegato e tollerante ha dato tanto a tutti quanto noi. Grazie a tutti i partiti della Camera e dei Comuni per aver appoggiato questa importantissima mozione che ci rende oggi tutti, Italo-Canadese. So I feel honored being here today, Mr. Speaker, being part of this incredible group of people who call Canada home. We are so proud of being Canadian, as this beautiful, diverse, and tolerant country has given so much to us. Thank you to all the parties in the House for supporting this very important motion that makes us all proud Italian Canadians today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Oshawa.
Buongiorno, Signor Presidente. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise in the House to discuss Motion 64, Italian Heritage Month. Italian Canadians have contributed immensely to Canadian society, and that's something that our party has always acknowledged. By recognizing the month of June as Italian Heritage Month, we are acknowledging the importance of educating and reflecting upon Italian heritage for future generations. Because, Mr. Speaker, Italian history is also Canadian history. Many people don't realize the second European to discover North America is generally agreed to be of an Italian explorer by the name Giovanni Caboto, or as many kids learn, John Cabot. We now believe his first landing was in Nova Scotia, so we could argue that the first European to set foot in Canada was an Italian. Many people don't know that Canada boasts the sixth largest Italian population outside Italy, 1.3 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker. You can't talk about Canadian culture and heritage without talking about the richness and warmth of Italian culture and heritage. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about the Italian community in my riding of Oshawa. Earlier this month, I had the pleasure of celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Oshawa Italian Recreation Club. And I'd like to take a moment to share a little bit about who they are and what they do, because they're such an important part of my community. Today, the president, Tony Rizzuto, oversees a vibrant organization. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I start off many of my mornings with a friendly cappuccino, usually made by Michelle, who since last week has been on maternity leave, but Johnny's taken over now. Or I'll drop by for lunch, and they even named a sandwich after me, Mr. Speaker. They call it the Colin. So they're always welcoming at social events. We have a vibrant bocce club. Nick and Francis take charge of that with all their different members. And they actually took a park in Oshawa called Radio Park. It's by the Oshawa Centre, and they beautified it, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if you've ever played bocce, but if you ever have the opportunity to come by, because our bocce club is so vibrant and so friendly. At our annual barbecues, for example, Nick and Francis and all their members, they come out and they share their hospitality, but they also share their homemade supersada, which is always a great hit. I got to tell you, I really enjoy it. But it wasn't always like this. We had to start somewhere, and they had to start somewhere. In 1954, a group of newly arrived young Italians created the Oshawa Inter-Football League. It was an amateur soccer team to remind them of Italy. The team was extremely successful, and the enthusiasm from their accomplishments was the beginning of the Oshawa Italian Recreation Club, which promoted not only sport activities, but social and cultural events as well. The club is a part of my community today, and it's one of the reasons why I feel that Italian Canadians deserve this recognition we're talking about today. Their warmth and hospitality makes everyone feel welcome. The Oshawa Italian Recreation Club is the product of two Italian clubs, the Oshawa Italia Club and the Italian Social and Recreation Club of Oshawa, who were coming together in times of need and ultimately deciding to amalgamate. And let me elaborate a little bit, Mr. Speaker. In 1966, the city of Florence was devastated by a flood that destroyed numerous historical buildings and works of art. So in order to help, the two clubs came together and started a fundraising campaign which raised tens of thousands of dollars for Florence. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, a year later, a massive earthquake hit Sicily, leaving thousands homeless and hundreds dead. The two clubs again came together and set up a joint fundraiser committee where Colonel Sam McLaughlin, who was the founder of General Motors Canada, was the honorary chairman. So the success of these two fundraising campaigns and the fact that these two clubs clearly worked together well was a great reason for them to join together into one. And they were named the Oshawa Italian Recreation Club, or what they say, OIRC. Mr. Speaker, this club began as a way for Italian immigrants to feel more at home by doing things such as, opening a social agency to help Italian immigrants better integrate into Canadian society, helping with Italian passports, pensions, etc. Its sole objective, however, was not to only help Italian immigrants, but the club has organized many successful things, fundraisers throughout our community for the Oshawa General Hospital, and they established an after-school program for elementary school-age kids. They sponsor local minor hockey and soccer teams, and they continue to fundraise and donate to local, national, and international charities. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Speaker, is that Italian Canadians have made a tremendous contribution to Canadian society, my local community, and internationally. OIRC was established as a meeting place for Italian immigrants, a place where they could feel at home, Mr. Speaker, but I got to tell you today, they're there to make everyone who walks through their doors feel at home. The Italian community is so well integrated and well established in Oshawa, and the club continues to promote Italian culture and recreational activities. Now, one of the things we do in Oshawa every year, it's a great festival in June. Oshawa celebrates something called Fiesta Week, and I got to tell you, Mr. Speaker, it's one of the oldest multicultural festivals in Canada. and every single year our Italian community opens up its doors to share its culture through dance, dining, and very good cheer. Everyone is welcome. And if you come to my community and it's not during Fiesta Week, well, don't worry about it. Within a walking distance from my office, you can drop into one of our many fine Italian restaurants, 2 of them run by the Fazio family called Fazio's and Tuto's. You'll see Tino, Nick, Rosaline, and Martin. They always welcome you with their great hospitality, and they work hard, Mr. Speaker, and they contribute to our community. Around the corner, Avantes is run by the Albus family. Tony, Ida, Dominic will always make you feel at home, and they'll serve you a great meal as well. And I got to tell you, their wood-burning oven makes awesome pizza within a couple minutes, and I'd recommend it to anybody because we have a great Italian community in Oshawa. Oh, tell me about it. Fantastic pizza. We need more around here. But this is why we're going to be one of the reasons why we're supporting the motion, which suggests that the government recognize the contributions that Italians have made to Canada by sharing their culture and language through education programs and community clubs such as the Oshawa Italian Recreation Club. And Mr. Speaker, if I do have a few more moments left, how much time do I have left? Just 3 minutes, eh? But if I can take a moment to take a little brief aside, Mr. Speaker. On my 10th wedding anniversary, I had to think of something really special because any woman who could spend 10 years with me deserves something very special. So I hear agreement from across the way. So I thought of one of the greatest surprises I could do. She loves cooking. And I thought, where could I take my wife to, allow her to enjoy a week away from the kids, that we could enjoy it together. And there is a famous Canadian cooking school in Tuscany. There's a gentleman named Umberto Menghi, and he has a great restaurant throughout Vancouver area, but he also has a culinary retreat in Tuscany. So I got to tell you, I kept everything secret. I packed her bags, and I picked her up one time, and I took her for our 10th wedding anniversary. And I got to tell you, I think it was one of the best holidays we ever had. We would wake up every morning, Mr. Speaker. We'd have a lovely breakfast. Then we would go to the cooking class. And I got to tell you, these guys did the impossible, Mr. Speaker. They did something that they thought couldn't be done. They actually taught me to cook. I learned a little bit how a little bit of sal and pepe makes a little bit of difference, and everything that we cooked up was bene, molto bene.
So there's still help for you, eh?
There's still help for anyone in the house. If you ever have the opportunity, a great Canadian restaurateur, if you get that opportunity to go out. And what it also did, though, it gave me the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to actually tour around Italy and see some of the works of art, see some of the culture, and as you can tell, enjoy a lot of the food. So, in closing, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say, of course, we're going to be supportive of this wonderful motion. A great opportunity to celebrate everything Italian Canadian. I also wanted to mention, it was an Italian that really got me interested in politics, Mr. Speaker. I think you know Senator Condonino, one of the leaders in the Italian community, one of the greatest guys out there. He's just a great example of how Italians, I believe Con came from Calabria as well, or he's friends down in that area, and committing his life to making Canada a better place. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, of course, we're going to be supporting, and I want to thank you, and grazie.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It is such an honour to be able to speak, to rise today in the House to speak about this great motion that my colleague from King Vaughan has put forward. I couldn't be more proud of the fact that she's done this. It is so well deserved and long overdue that we make the month of June the National Italian Heritage Month. Italians have a rich heritage in Canada, going right back to the original European arrivals with Giovanni Caboto that discovered, not discovered, but arrived in Newfoundland in 1497 and claimed it for England at that time. And then Giovanni Verrazzano had also come to Canada and explored the Atlantic Canada for the French. So we've had a rich history of exploration within Canada, of helping to open up the frontiers to settle this great country that we have today. They served in senior positions for New France and for the Jesuits all through the colony at that time. That have made our country great. We even had an Italian contingent that fought for the British in the War of 1812. So some great history that I gleaned from the Canadian Encyclopedia that I remember reading as a kid, and just being so proud of the heritage that comes from my father. Italians, there were two waves of Italians that came to Canada. The first wave from 1900 to the First World War, where about 120,000 Italians came to our country. They held a very broad range of different positions, from craftsmen to artists to musicians to teachers, etc. The second wave came between 1950 and 1970. That was about 500,000 Italians that came to this great country at that time. So we had this has led now to the census in 2006 declaring that there's now 1.4 million Canadians of Italian descent that are now part of this the great mosaic of Canada. 75% of those Italians came from southern Italy, which is where my father is originally from Calabria, from a tiny little, and this won't surprise anyone, very small rural village on the side of a cliff in Calabria. Actually, Mr. Speaker, I've just been very aware, if I could please get consent to share my time with Steverton, Steverton, Richmond East.
Does the honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Editing have the unanimous consent of the House to divide his time equally? Yes? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Grazie, Mr. Speaker. So I'd like to tell the story about my father coming to Canada in 1953, and he still shares this story today with anyone who'll listen. So here we are in 1953. It's after the Second World War. It's a very desperate situation where food and fuel and clothing are very scarce. Many people are looking at, how the future looked very bleak for so many Italians at that time. CP Rail came to the small town of Savuto di Cleto. 1 minute left? Really? Wow, okay. And so my family comes over in 1953, and my father arrives. In Italy, he's wearing a T-shirt and shorts. Southern Italy, there's no snow, there's no cold weather. And they arrive in Montreal in January. They get on a train, and he says, all I saw was snow, ice, and bush until we arrived in this tiny little town in northern Ontario called Hornepayne. He said, when we heard about Canada and southern Italy, he said, yeah, sure, they said it was cold, but not that cold, right? How cold can it really be? And so so he says, here we thought we were going to heaven in Canada. And he said, it turned out when I arrived in Hornepayne, I thought I'd gone to frozen purgatory. And but they were tough, resilient. They pushed forward. They survived, and they're very prosperous today. And I am so proud to be the prodigy to be able to stand in this House today to represent my Italian heritage. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Steveston, Richmond East.
Monsieur le Président, je suis vraiment fier d'être.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to be here this afternoon to support my colleague's motion, the member for King Vaughan. My name is Giuseppe Eduardo Solido, and I am the son of my parents, my grandmother, my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Giovanni, and
della mia collega essere qui e parlare un po' di italiano e aussi un po' di français. This motion deals, Mr. Speaker, with culture, with music, the wonderful contributions of Italians throughout civilization and Italians here in Canada. But as my colleague from Okanagan Centre mentioned, this is more than about language, more about culture, more than about a philosophy or architecture. It's about people. It's about the many people of Italian background that came here to Canada to build a new life for themselves, but more importantly, for their children and their grandchildren. My colleague from Vaughan Woodbridge eloquently discussed the pioneers, the famous folk who trailblazed for the Italian community. And as a young boy, I'd head over with a good friend of mine, and he's like my fratello, Pino Correale. We'd go to the Columbus Center that Senator Condonino and Sam Ciccolini worked so hard to build. And my colleague from King Vaughan talked about Corriere Canadese and former members of Parliament, and Joe Volpe, who stepped back in to become the publisher and owner of Corriere Canadese, so that you'd have a thriving Italian voice in Toronto. And the motto of Corriere Canadese is to be proud of one's Italian heritage, but to be fiercely Canadian. And also, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that's what we're celebrating today. We're celebrating the integration of millions of Canadians of Italian background who came with nothing. My colleague from Hastings, Lennox Addington, his family came on the second wave of immigration, as did mine. My mom and dad and my grandparents came from nothing, from a little town called Ceprano, which is in between Naples and Rome. And that's significant because it was the supply lines during the Second World War. So my father, my mother, and my grandparents' education and livelihood for 8, 9 years and a bit before was making sure they didn't get killed during war. So themselves and a whole lot of other folks came over with nothing. And my parents and grandparents stopped off in Halifax, and just like my colleague from Hastings, Lennox Addington, they also thought that they had come to the wrong place, perhaps a purgatory and not a heaven. And yet they then moved on to Toronto, where my mom started to go to school, but she was 14 and they put her, my mother, Margarita, Nina. She was 14 years old and she hung out with 6 and 8-year-olds. Well, guess what? She didn't stay in school long, but she went out and she worked. And that is what a lot of immigrants did. They went out and worked. And my father, who is my hero, Loreto, or as I say, Papa, when I would go to him and I'd bring back a report card, I was proud, I had 88. And his response, Mr. Speaker, what happened to the other 12? And that is the strength of the community, the importance of education, the importance of family, of faith, of social justice. And I am proud, Mr. Speaker, today, this afternoon, to stand in the House to support this motion of my colleague from King Vaughan and encourage all members to support the motion as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.